Today, I want to tell you a story. And it's a story not everyone knows, and it's possibly the most real and personal story about myself that I can tell anyone. My name is Boehme, and this is my coming out story. I grew up in a large family where I was the second to youngest of 6 kids. My family was loud and lively, and as a young kid, I was unabashedly happy and highly imaginative all the time. And at home, my parents didn't stop me from playing dress up as a child, where I would wear dresses and skirts and scarves around my head to resemble long hair. I had an absurd collection of Barbie dolls, and I look back on photos and footage of myself as a little kid, and I see a child so incredibly free with no inhibitions. My family was also incredibly religious. If there was just 2 entities that were constant in my childhood growing up, it was Disney and Jesus. And even though my childhood was loving and comfortable, it was also incredibly sheltered and unknowingly confined in a type of bubble when it came to my beliefs. I did all the things a good Christian boy would do. I attended Sunday school. I went to Bible camps. I participated on many worship teams. I eventually grew up to be a volunteer youth leader for years and eventually led a few worship teams. I volunteered at camps. I starred in church productions. I even went as far as to call my church my school because I was homeschooled my entire life and all of my childhood friends went to the same church as me. Like I said, I was a happy child without a care in the world. But that all completely changed for me between the ages of 13 and 14, because it was at that age that I first discovered my attraction to men. Because before that, romance was only something I saw in G-rated Disney fairy tales between a prince and a princess, or a man and a woman. All I knew about being gay was how sinful those people were and how their choices led to sorrow and separation from God in heaven, because that's exactly what my parents and church taught me, and I didn't know any better. So here I am at 13, and I find myself attracted to men. And not only attracted, but sexually charged by seeing videos or erotic pictures of them. And just like that, in a matter of minutes, on one unassuming afternoon, this kid, who always did the right thing, who was always doing what he should do and believe in for the good of God, was caught in an act of sexual sin by watching pornography for the first time, and even worse, that the pornography involved gay men, and even worse, that I enjoyed it. Thus began the darkest years of my life emotionally, because from 13 to 18, throughout all of junior high and high school, I had this dark secret weighing on my shoulders. The innocent, happy boy with no care in the world was gone. I had what I considered to be these sinful feelings beating on me every day, and I was completely ashamed. So I chose to suppress it, to hide it, and pretend that I'm still the same good Christian boy that everyone knew, while secretly but constantly praying and praying so desperately to not feel the way I was feeling. My dad was a missionary my entire life. He would travel the world all the time and preaching the gospel and leading people to Christ. Our family grew up together, going on these trips where we would try to lead people to Jesus. And as a teenager, for every single one of these trips, I was desperately praying to be changed and to not feel these urges anymore. I was jealous and silently bitter towards so many people who would say on these trips that they felt the presence of God come over them. My dad would say that their souls were saved and God's power and love did that for them. And so here I am, a boy who went to church all his life, memorized Bible verses, volunteered for years, and committed my entire childhood to telling people to trust in God. Here I am pleading with God to save me and release me from this sin and this shame because I didn't want it. I felt dirty, I felt wrong, and all I wanted was to feel what all these other people were claiming to have felt. But for every single trip, all those years, I still never had that release from shame. That feeling of the Holy Spirit that everyone else felt, I didn't. My prayers weren't working. And I resolved myself to the fact that I would simply never tell anyone of my personal struggles, never get married, and I would just have to be alone the rest of my life. After high school graduation, I did something that permanently altered the course of my life. It was the first time I branched out of the church and joined a community theater production. It was the first time I was ever exposed to a community where being gay or part of the LGBTQ community is common without second thought. Besides my interaction with my sister's lesbian girlfriend, this was the only other time I was exposed to other gay people. But more importantly, it was the very first time in my life that someone ever asked me if I was gay. A question I had spent years avoiding to answer. And at that time, my answer would be, no, I'm not gay, I'm straight. And then I would just smile and laugh it off and quickly change the subject. It was after joining community theater that I made many new circles of friends, where I eventually met a man who would go on to make the biggest impact on my life than ever before. Because after meeting me, he felt compelled to reach out and extend a listening ear. And though I continued to tell people that I was straight, he still extended his friendship and confidence should I ever feel the need to talk to someone about anything I might be struggling with or feeling. After some time and reflection, I hesitantly took him up on his offer to talk. And for the first time, I started writing down words about my own feelings that I had never shared with anyone. And it wasn't very long until I typed the actual words, "I am gay." And immediately as I pressed send, I knew that it meant everything was about to change, because I was suddenly overcome with such a strong conviction to start telling the truth to everyone now that just one person knew. And so a couple days later, I decided it was time to tell my parents. And that night still goes down as one of the most painful memories I have ever had with my parents. Because after I told them that evening that I was gay, they both instantly shed tears of sadness for me. I had never seen my dad sob before in my 18 years, almost 19 years of living. Nothing can truly prepare you to see your parents breaking down right in front of you. And even worse, knowing that you're the reason they're breaking. I had seen the emotional struggle my parents went through with my older sister when they learned of her relationship with another woman just years prior, but nothing could have prepared me for this night. After telling my parents I needed an emotional escape, and I immediately packed a bag and drove to my sister's and her girlfriend's house that same night. And so I sat down with them and I told them the news of my being gay, and their reaction was immediate tears of joy. And they proceeded to hug me and tell me how proud they were of me and how much they loved me. I had literally gone from a house full of sorrow and tears of pain over to a house of joy and tears of celebration. For the first time in years, I finally felt free. I didn't have to pretend anymore, and I didn't have to feel ashamed every day. The next few weeks were spent telling the rest of my family and my friends and my church leaders about my being gay. And it was still hard, especially when my dad tried to persuade me to consider conversion therapy and talking to counselors about my issue. But I'm thankful that I stood my ground and never gave in to the notion of conversion therapy. Now, after I had come out to my church leaders, I was reassured that my presence and involvement in the church wouldn't change just because I came out as gay. And for a few months, that remained the case. But one day, I got a phone call from my youth pastor, and he told me that I was being officially relieved of any future involvement in the church. Their reasoning was muddled, and there was no opportunity for me to appeal to them. And that was that. But the moral of the story was that I wasn't let go of my involvement with the church because I was gay, but because I was openly gay. That was the last painful step in the coming out process for me, because I had been a part of this church family for my entire life, and to be let go without any legitimized reasoning, with no regard to my years of service and my involvement and commitment to so many people, all of that was disregarded in just a 20-minute phone call. This coming from an institution that preaches to love one another unconditionally. It was really eye-opening for me, and it was at that moment I knew who my true friends, true family, and true support system were. But there's a misguided impression that many LGBTQ kids come from broken families and messed up environments, and by not having a morally stable upbringing is what leads them to choose a disruptive path of homosexuality because no one was there to guide them down the right path. But my household wasn't broken. I was surrounded by what many would consider to be good role models and influencers. My dad is the most passionate, committed, Christian, God-fearing missionary I've ever known, and his son is gay. And God didn't make a mistake in creating me how I am. Because as my dad would always preach, God doesn't make mistakes. And since I didn't come from a broken home with bad influences, how do you explain me? I've made mistakes and I've messed up so many times, but I can absolutely say that I wouldn't go back and change anything because I couldn't be happier, confident, or more empowered as I am now. And all things happen when they're meant to happen. As cliche as it sounds, I felt like my life didn't really start until after I came out. Though my relationship with my parents and my church were permanently affected by all of this, and in some ways never fully recovered, nothing could have prepared me for the amount of freedom and love and unconditional support I've been given and continue to experience ever since I first typed out those 3 terrifying and liberating words: I am gay.